They no longer raise their voices. They no longer wield overt power. They no longer wear the crown of kings or the armor of warriors. Instead, they whisper, they empathize, they offer you space. They say, I support you, while quietly rearranging the world to keep you small. This is not the old patriarchy. This is its evolution. The new patriarchy doesn't dominate with fists. It dominates with language. It cloaks control in kindness. It disguises suppression as support. It wears the mask of progress while preserving the same ancient hierarchy. And the most dangerous part, you don't see it coming, because it doesn't look like oppression. It looks like a conversation. It sounds like, I hear you. It feels like, I'm on your side. But underneath the softness, the same old structures remain. The same expectations, the same limitations, the same unspoken rules about who you're allowed to be. They've just been rebranded, marketed as modern masculinity, packaged as allyship, sold as equality. But equality that requires your silence is not equality. Support that demands your submission is not support. Love that fears your power is not love. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. In the new patriarchy, the shadow is not hidden. It's polished. It's presented as virtue. It's weaponized as morality. It's used to gaslight you into compliance. And when you resist, they don't call you hysterical. They call you aggressive. They don't say you're out of control. They say you're not being constructive. Because the new patriarchy doesn't need to silence you. It just needs to make you doubt yourself. It thrives on your hesitation. It feeds on your self-censorship. It survives every time you choose peace over truth. But here's the truth. Your voice is not too loud. Your ambition is not too much. Your anger is not too dangerous. They are necessary. Because the new patriarchy is not dismantled by politeness. It is dismantled by clarity, by the unwavering conviction that you are not here to make others comfortable. You are here to be free. And freedom does not ask for permission. It does not wait for approval. It does not soften its edges to fit into someone else's narrative. It stands tall. It speaks boldly. It refuses to be tamed. So, burn the script they handed you. Reject the roles they assigned you. Dismantle the cage they built with compliments and concessions. And remember, the most revolutionary thing you can do is to be unapologetically, uncompromisingly yourself. Because when you become unapologetically yourself, you expose the lie. You reveal the mechanism behind their smiles, the carefully veiled structures designed to contain your power, to pacify your truth with empty praise, to keep you docile with approval. They don't want your silence. They want your agreement. They want your complicity disguised as mutual respect. They want your consent to a system they refuse to admit still exists. Because if they admitted it, they'd have to change. And change threatens control. So instead, they dress control in the language of empathy. They disarm you with sensitivity. They build walls around you made not of stone, but of soft words. And when you call it out, they retreat into fragility. Suddenly, you're the oppressor. Suddenly, you're the one being unfair. Suddenly, your truth becomes an attack, and their discomfort becomes the centerpiece of the conversation. That is the new patriarchal playbook. Weaponize empathy. Deflect with vulnerability. Maintain control by pretending to have none. But don't you dare fall for it. Because real power, true divine masculine power, doesn't fear your fire. It celebrates it. It doesn't ask you to tone it down. It matches it. It doesn't feel threatened by your truth. It amplifies it. And anything less is not evolution. It's a more sophisticated form of suppression. This is why you must become fluent in the language of clarity. Not rage, not reaction. Clarity. The kind of clarity that cuts through manipulation like sunlight through fog. The kind that no longer needs to shout to be heard. Because clarity is power. It is what the new patriarchy fears the most. Not your rebellion, your self-possession. Not your defiance. Your discernment. Not your protest. Your presence. Because a woman or a man awakened beyond gender's grip, who sees through the veil, cannot be controlled. And when enough of us see it, when enough of us stop confusing softness with safety, the entire illusion begins to collapse. Not with violence, but with vision, not with war, but with awareness. And awareness is the sword they never see coming, because it doesn't scream. It doesn't break doors down. It simply removes consent. Consent to the games. Consent to the grooming. Consent to the carefully coded language of power wrapped in concern. You don't need to fight them. You need only to see them. To pierce through the velvet armor of their words and recognize what lies beneath. A desperate attempt to preserve control by pretending they've given it up. The new patriarchy isn't obvious. It's subtle, strategic. It adapts. It trades domination for diplomacy, obedience for openness. And yet, still beneath every sentence lies the same ancient whisper. Know your place. But you no longer belong to places that shrink you. You no longer sit at tables that require your silence. You no longer trade your fire for acceptance. Because now you've seen it. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. You've seen how they praise your calm, when your truth might shatter their image. You've seen how they encourage balance when your clarity threatens their position. You've seen how they reward cooperation when your independence terrifies them. And you've decided consciously, irrevocably, that you are done playing small. Not to dominate, but to liberate yourself and those watching you. Because every time you choose truth over approval, every time you choose presence over passivity, you give silent permission for someone else to do the same. You dismantle the illusion from within. And that is how the new patriarchy falls. Not with one battle, but with millions of awakenings, with voices that no longer stutter, with boundaries that no longer bend, with souls that no longer ask for permission to be free. Not because they were given power, but because they remembered they always had it. And now they are no longer afraid to use it. Because once the remembering begins, the unraveling becomes inevitable. You start to see it everywhere, not just in relationships, but in institutions, in media, in every corner of culture that calls itself progressive, while subtly demanding your obedience. And where once you may have second-guessed yourself, now you know. You feel the shift in your bones. You hear it in your own voice. The steadiness that wasn't there before. The clarity that no longer seeks permission. You walk into rooms you used to shrink in, and you expand, not in arrogance, in alignment, because now you see that what they call confidence in a man, they call threatening in a woman. What they call leadership in tradition, they call rebellion when you speak it. But you are no longer confused. You no longer accept double standards disguised as diplomacy. You no longer entertain compliments that carry a leash. You no longer soften your truth to preserve their comfort. Because comfort is not the goal. Liberation is. And you have learned The most radical thing you can do is to refuse the script, to stop auditioning for a role that was written to keep you silent, to stand in your own story and write it word by word without apology. That's when the new patriarchy panics. Not when you shout, but when you glow. When you walk into a room with no need to be validated, because you've already claimed yourself. When you say no, without explanation. When you say yes, without fear. When you stop performing and start embodying. They can't control that. They can't repackage that. They can't weaponize that against you, because there's nothing left for them to own. You've reclaimed your voice, your boundaries, your sovereignty. And now, you're not just resisting the new patriarchy, you're erasing it by refusing to play the game, by burning the rule book, and by standing fully, fiercely, and finally in the power of your awakened self. And once you stand in that power, truly stand, everything begins to shift. Not because the world suddenly becomes fair, but because you no longer accept its false terms. You no longer barter with systems that demand your silence as currency. You no longer negotiate your worth in rooms built to diminish you. You no longer prove, perform, or placate. Because now you remember power is not granted. It is owned. And when you own it authentically, unapologetically, you expose every structure that was designed to dim it. The workplace that called you too ambitious. The partner that praised your strength but feared your voice. The culture that sold you empowerment while demanding obedience. It all reveals itself because the moment you stop needing their approval, they lose control. And that is what terrifies them. Not your fire, not your intelligence, not even your anger, but your detachment from their validation. Because validation is the leash. Approval is the collar. Soft words are the gate. And once you walk past all of it, once you choose truth over comfort, clarity over charisma, freedom over flattery, you become uncontrollable. And that is the death knell of the new patriarchy. Not a revolution of fists, but a quiet exodus of awakened souls, refusing to bow. And here's what they never expected, that your silence would become a storm, that your stillness would become a stand, that your no would be sacred, and your yes would carry God in its tone. You are no longer their narrative, no longer their project, no longer their strong woman. They pretend to uplift while secretly trying to contain. You are your own myth now, your own revolution, your own rising, and nothing they do can unwrite that. Because once a soul rises, once it breathes in the full depth of its own truth, there's no returning to the Kajen, no matter how velvet the bars. You've seen what the world looks like when it bends to your silence. You've lived what it feels like to shrink and be praised for it. You've played their game, followed their rules, wore the mask they handed you, and still you were not free. So now you no longer seek freedom from them. You seek it within. And in that seeking, you've uncovered the deeper lie that the new patriarchy was ever about you at all. Because it was never about your capacity. It was about their comfort. It was never about your role. It was about their relevance. They built a system that feared your evolution and then tried to flatter you into staying small. But the world doesn't need you to be soft. It needs you to be sovereign. Not agreeable, not digestible, unmistakably whole. Because when you step into that kind of power, you don't just free yourself, you shatter the illusion for others. You become the blueprint for what's possible when a human being chooses truth over tradition. You stop asking, will they accept me? And start declaring, I accept me. And that is enough. And from that place, you no longer need to fight the new patriarchy. You simply outgrow it. You walk past it. You outshine it. You render it obsolete by refusing to let it define what strength, what leadership, what liberation looks like anymore. Because now, you are the new myth, not a version they can sell, but a truth they cannot stop, and the story of who you become. Fierce, clear, rooted in your own power, is not just a rejection of the old world. It is the birth of a new one. A world not built on the illusion of equality, but on the embodiment of truth. A world where power no longer imitates dominance. It flows from alignment, where strength isn't measured by how well you perform under pressure, but by how fully you inhabit your own soul. Where leadership doesn't look like control, but like clarity. Where love doesn't require your shrinking, but your expansion. This new world will not be handed to you. It will not be welcomed by the keepers of the old script. It will be resisted, mocked, minimized, but it will emerge because it begins with you. With the moment you choose not to mirror the world's dysfunction, but to embody your wholeness instead. The moment you stop asking for the keys to a kingdom designed to silence you and start building your own kingdom on the ruins of their fear. This isn't rebellion for its own sake. It's restoration of dignity, of sovereignty, of the sacred fire that lives inside every soul that has ever been told to sit down, be polite, stay manageable. No, you were not born to be manageable. You were born to be magnificent, to lead not with ego, but with essence, to speak not to appease, but to awaken, to rise not above others, but beyond the limits they placed on your becoming. So burn the mask, break the mold, say the thing that terrifies them, walk the path that liberates you. And when they say you've changed, say, you're right, I've remembered. Because in this new world, you are not waiting to be invited in. You are the threshold. You are the voice they tried to soften, the fire they tried to tame, the light they tried to dim, and still you rise, with no apology, no permission, and no more chains disguised as kindness. Because now you see, and now you lead, and in that leading, not from a throne, not from behind a podium, but from the truth of your being, you become a lighthouse for those still swimming in silence. You don't lead with domination. You lead by being whole. And wholeness is contagious. It calls out the truth in others. It reminds those around you of the freedom buried beneath their performance. It dares the quiet ones to speak, and the broken ones to rise, and the lost ones to come home to themselves. You become the proof that power doesn't need to control, that love doesn't need to submit, that strength doesn't need to roar to be unshakable. And so the myth of the new patriarchy collapses, not in flames, but in silence. The silence of a system no longer fed by your obedience. The silence of voices once quieted, now thunderous with self-possession. The silence of a new era, where soft words are no longer weapons, but witness, where the language of liberation becomes fluent again. Not spoken from fear, but from freedom. This is not the end of the fight. It is the end of the illusion. And in its place, the slow, steady, sacred rise of a new kind of power. Not ruled by men, not ruled by women, but ruled by truth. rooted in vision, carved by clarity, and carried forward by every soul who chooses, every single day, to live untamed, unapologetic, and uncompromised. Not because it's easy, not because it's safe, but because nothing else is worthy of you. So let them keep their soft words. You'll keep your fire, because your fire was never the threat, it was the mirror. It showed them their own dullness, their own compromise, their own quiet surrender to systems that no longer serve the soul. That's why they tried to smother it. Not because it burned too bright, but because it revealed too much. It revealed the truth about the world they were trying to preserve. A world where obedience is mistaken for peace, where power whispers and calls itself progress, where silence is repackaged as wisdom. But you are no longer fooled. You have reclaimed the sacred flame, the one that doesn't destroy, but illuminates, the fire that scorches illusion. That melts the masks, that leaves only what is real. And what's real is this: you are not here to maintain systems. You are here to birth new realities. You are not here to be the acceptable version of yourself. You are here to be the unmistakable version, the one that doesn't shrink for comfort, doesn't wait for the world to catch up, doesn't beg for space at a table built to confine you. No, you build your own table, your own rhythm, your own kingdom, and in doing so, you free not just yourself, but everyone who sees you and whispers to themselves, if she can be that free, maybe I can too. And that's how the world changes. Not with permission, with presence, not with war, with awakening. So stay lit, stay vast, stay wild in your knowing. Let them call it too much. Let them call it dangerous. Let them call it defiant. Because when you rise beyond the language of control, when you transcend the rules meant to keep you tame, they'll have nothing left to say. And you will finally be free. Free in a way that makes no sense to those still asleep. Free in a way that doesn't fit into their frameworks, doesn't bow to their standards, doesn't ask how loud is too loud, or how bright is too blinding. Because freedom, true freedom, doesn't come with a volume knob. It doesn't whisper to make others comfortable. It resonates. It echoes through generations. It bends time. It rewrites the very fabric of what is allowed, what is expected, what is possible. And now you are not just a voice in the dark. You are the one who turned the lights on. You've peeled away the velvet softness that used to mask their chains. You've stepped beyond the illusion of progress that costs you your fire. You've shed the burden of being palatable in a system that feeds on your silence. And now you are not waiting. You are embodying the future they feared, the power they tried to domesticate, the truth they buried beneath layers of careful language and curated concern. And that truth, it is rising now, in you, through you, because of you, not to burn it all down, but to build something worthy, a life, a love, a legacy, where clarity is the culture, where truth is the tradition, where freedom isn't promised, it's practiced. And from this day forward, you no longer play small. You no longer entertain control wrapped in compassion. You no longer translate yourself into something softer just to be heard, because the world no longer needs your translation. It needs your truth, unfiltered, unapologetic, unchained. This is your time, not to negotiate, not to navigate gently, but to lead with fire, with vision, with a voice that no longer fits inside the frame, because you've outgrown the game. And you are no longer here to win it. You're here to end it. So now you understand. The new patriarchy didn't need to shout. It only needed you to doubt yourself, to trade your voice for validation, your fire for favor, your truth for peace. But that deal is done. You've remembered who you are. You've burned the scripts. You've buried the lies that said you were too much, too loud, too alive. And now there is no going back. Not to silence, not to approval, not to systems that smile while stealing your sovereignty. You are not the whisper. You are the thunder. You are not the apology. You are the awakening. And when they speak in soft words that feel like walls, you'll hear it. You'll see it. You'll rise through it. Because they no longer control the narrative. You do. And your story isn't one of endurance. It's one of evolution, of burning illusions, of breaking patterns, of becoming the force they never saw coming. Not to destroy them, but to free yourself. And in that freedom, you become the revolution.